Hello, my dear followers, and welcome back to Turkish Spotlight Secrets. Settle in, because every stirring detail you're about to hear is right here in this video. Before we dive into it, remember to subscribe, tap the bell icon, and show some love if you enjoy hearing the stories that reveal the heart behind the headlines. Tonight's spotlight falls on a moment that stunned a studio, quieted millions across the country, and reminded everyone what devotion looks like when the lights fade and the room goes still. It unfolded under the sharp shine of a primetime set, the kind that makes every blink look cinematic and every pause feel like a cliffhanger. The guest chair belonged to Alp Navras, poised yet clearly wrestling with the kind of memory you can't rehearse away. The host, leaned in with gentle curiosity and asked the kind of question that can knock the wind out of you even when you're prepared. What was the most touching moment of your life? For a heartbeat, the studio held its breath. Alp looked down, the way someone does when trying to gather words from places words don't easily go. He inhaled, slow and deep, then lifted his gaze. His voice came out unsteady, like an orchestra tuning before the music starts. He began, as if bracing himself by addressing the person who had opened a door to something raw. Seeing Alina in the hospital that day was the hardest moment I've ever lived. There was no performance here, no glitter in the corner of the eye that could be waved off as clever lighting. When he said those words, his lashes turned wet, his throat closed, and the world of bright cameras shrank into the memory he was reliving. He told that when Alina first opened her eyes, she reached for him without asking, found his hand, and whispered, "Everything will be fine," all while he knew in his bones that nothing about that day felt fine. It wasn't a line for the audience or a mantra to sound strong, it was the kind of promise two people make to keep the ground from splitting beneath their feet. He explained, gently and with aching care, that years earlier Alina had faced a serious illness, one she had kept away from the public and even some friends. She didn't want pity. She didn't want headlines. She wanted to lock it in a room and get through it with grace. But on those days, grace was heavy. Alp said he never left her side, even when the hours blurred and the clock felt like it had stopped. In front of that nation of viewers, he confessed something that he'd carried for so long. She seemed unshakable in the daylight, strong and luminous like she always is, but late at night he would hear her cry softly into the pillow so no one would notice. That sound, he said, shattered his heart in a way that didn't break him but rebuilt him. It taught him what love looks like when it can't be measured by red carpets or premieres. The room went silent, a silence that throbbed with empathy. Even eyes had a sheen to them, the kind of delicate mist that hosts rarely allow to cross their faces on live television. Alp's lip trembled as he pushed on, and in that shaved, tentative voice you use when you're trying not to cry again, he added, "That morning Alina looked at me and asked, 'Can you love me like this?' And in that instant I understood I didn't love her for the image the world saw or the perfect frames on magazine covers. I loved her fears, her doubts, her quiet bravery, everything." You could feel the heartbeat of the audience aligning with his. The studio lights hummed. The cameras kept rolling, but no one seemed to notice their presence anymore. There was no sensationalism, no push for more details than he wished to offer. It felt sacred, a confession delivered without theatrics. Visibly moved, simply nodded, allowing the truth of the moment to breathe. And then the outside world rushed in. Fans who had been watching from couches and coffee shops flooded the timelines with messages that glowed with warmth instead of gossip's usual bite. "This is love," one comment read, simple and powerful. "Real love is not glossy, it stands in the hospital corridors," wrote another. Within minutes, Alp and Alina's names rose through the trending lists, but not because of a scandal or a rumor, because kindness had gone viral. After the broadcast ended and the credits washed over the screen, Alina decided to break her own quiet. She posted a short clip of Alp's trembling confession and wrote beneath it, "With you, everything is okay." No dramatic caption, no need to explain more than that. The message found millions of hearts in hours, and the likes stacked up like candles in a vigil, each click an affirmation that people understood what they were seeing, a bond that didn't need to shout to be heard. Behind the scenes, off-air and long after the audience had filed out, the story became even more tender. Crew members said Alp stayed in the studio much longer than expected, lingering in that suspended quiet that follows a confession. He sat for a while, then stood and walked to the edge of the stage. Someone had pulled up a photo of Alina on a monitor, smiling, a soft, natural smile that didn't perform, and he just looked at it. No one interrupted. No one tried to lighten the mood. Later, one of the technicians murmured that he had never seen Alp speak with such exposed honesty. It was as if he had put his heart on the table and trusted the world not to drop it. Friends close to Alina, who cherish her privacy fiercely, offered a rare glimpse of their perspective without naming specifics. One of them said that Alina still remembers those days with tears in her eyes, and that her gratitude for every moment Alp stayed. Every midnight whisper, every early morning coffee he didn't even drink, every joke that landed badly but tried to lift the air, has never dimmed. Those memories live not as shadows but as proof that the love they share can walk through difficult rooms and come out carrying light. The couple has always tried to keep a low profile about the corners of their life that don't belong to cameras. Red carpets come and go. Scripts end and start again. But they have been careful with what they let the world keep. Perhaps that's why this moment felt like a blessing rather than exposure. It wasn't a tell-all. It wasn't an invitation to pry. It was a window, open just enough to let compassion in, and then gently closed again. What happened next seemed to happen on the city's behalf. Istanbul, with its streets that hold so many stories, offered them a night of quiet. The following evening, they were seen walking hand in hand by the Bosphorus, the kind of walk that's half about fresh air and half about feeling your pulse slow down. Their steps matched effortlessly, their shoulders brushing, their conversation low. A breeze tugged at Alina's hair, and Alp tilted his head toward her with that instinctive protectiveness that comes from knowing someone's winter and not only their spring. A passerby snapped a few photos, tasteful, not invasive, and within hours those images traveled across social media like a reminder people had been waiting for. This is why they remain one of the most beloved pairs to ever grace Turkish screens. In the comments under those photos, you could feel a chorus swell. Not the kind that idolizes blindly, but the kind that recognizes devotion when it sees it. They're each other's safe place, a fan wrote. Another added, he didn't talk to become a hero. He talked because love asked him to be brave. It wasn't only their beauty that anyone was celebrating, though it would be impossible to ignore the cinematic way they light up any frame, but the invisible threads that hold two lives together when no one is watching. As the night drew on and the water darkened under the city's lights, the story kept deepening. People who had never met them felt like they had been given permission to exhale, to believe again that celebrity doesn't have to remove the human from the human being. And in a world that often expects perfection to be ironclad and unfeeling, the sight of Alp's tears and Alina's steady message felt like a small revolution. The truth is, Alp's confession was never just about romance. It stretched beyond roses and grand gestures, beyond premieres and applause. It spoke to the fiercest forms of support, to the kind of trust that says, you don't have to be fine for me to stay, to the quiet humanity that allows two people to carry the complicated weight of real life without pretending it's light. He wasn't telling a fairy tale. He was telling the part of the story where love buys extra blankets, learns the names of nurses, memorizes medication times, and still cracks a smile because the person you love is here, and that's a miracle you don't take for granted. Hours later, back online, the wave of support hadn't slowed. Followers sent messages not just to Alp, but to Alina, thanking her for trusting him and, by extension, trusting the audience with a piece of their truth. Some shared their own whispered nights, the hospital corridors they had walked, the hands they had held. In a way, their moment of honesty spun out into thousands of other memories, weaving a community of people who suddenly felt less alone. By morning, the clip lived everywhere, but it somehow didn't feel overexposed. The narrative stayed tender, protected by the very fans who could have wrung it dry. Maybe that's the quiet pact between them and their audience, to hold what is precious carefully, to watch without poking at the soft spots. And so the story kept its glow. Magazine covers might try to replicate it, headlines might try to summarize it, but what remained was a feeling you can't edit, only feel. Later asked about the interview, admitted that he had rarely witnessed a guest reach for truth with such open hands. He said there was a moment, off camera, just a minute before the show resumed after a break, where he and Alp sat in silence. Didn't probe. He simply placed a glass of water within reach, and Alp nodded. Two men on a stage, no performance between them, just an understanding that some answers are heavier than others. Alina, in her own quiet way, let the world know that the calm after the storm wasn't a performance either. "With you, everything is okay," she had written, and the echo of that sentence kept ringing because it said so much with so little. It said, "I saw you." It said, "I needed you." It said, "We are in this together, even when the room is cold and loud and far from kind." And it reminded everyone that when two people are committed to holding each other up, even the word okay becomes a kind of poetry. By week's end, Istanbul returned to its usual rhythm, cars threading the bridges, ferries slipping past each other like dancers, cafes humming. But those who watched that night carried something new with them. Maybe they looked at their own person a little differently, reached for a hand a little sooner, forgave a little faster. That's the strange gift of a moment like this. It belongs to two people, and somehow it belongs to all of us. As for Alp and Alina, they moved as they always have, carefully, respectfully, graciously. Privacy intact, boundaries respected. But the world now knew something it hadn't before, that their love had been tested not by rumors or distance or schedules, but by the whispering edge of fear. And that, in the face of it, they chose to stay. That choice, once spoken aloud in a quiet studio, became the truest headline of all. And so, dear viewers of Turkish Spotlight Secrets, that's the story we carry out of the studio and into the night, a story not built on spectacle, but on the steady courage to be human in public. It's the kind of story that will be remembered not because it shocked us, but because it softened us. In a time when noise gets all the attention, this was a moment of silence that said everything.